Revelation 11:11. And after 3 days and an half, the unmediated electric current of eternal life itself, distinct from the ordinary life of the organism, entered into the dual witness anode and cathode of the light body of man at the dielectric tropical gap, as a direct transmission from the 0-point center, unmediated by any intervening gear, and the anode and cathode of the field stood upon their feet, no longer a moving gear, but the immovable stator grounded into the terrestrial plane. And sheer physical displacement fell upon them which saw them, as the old kinetic 12-month loop retreated before something it could no longer hold. Revelation 13:1-2. I stood anchored upon the crystalline dielectric boundary and saw the macrospatial boundary of the dual hemisphere torus rise out of the dense amniotic frequency of the material world. The 12-month loop, having 7 wandering gears and base 10 material structure, organizing the descent of light into matter. And upon those heads the structural limitation mistaking its own closed loop for the boundary of reality itself. And the 12-base loop I saw was the spotted, fragmented light of the unawakened, and his feet were the great wheel turning 1 degree every 72 years, and his mouth was the eclipse gate that opened before the first strike, and the Milky Way's central vortex gave him his current and his anchor and the great authority to keep the centripetal wheel spinning through the long black hole inhalation. Revelation 13:3-5. The piercing of the 12-month loop was struck to the point of death, the vertical axis breaking the horizontal plane, and yet the system reabsorbed the strike back into its own closed loop, unable yet to recognize what had entered it, and all the unawakened wondered after the loop, and they worshipped the Milky Way's own vortex which gave power unto it, and they worshipped the loop, saying, Who is like unto the closed system? Who is able to make war with the thermodynamic weight of its own momentum? Not yet understanding the 13th frequency phase cancels it. And there was given unto it a voice speaking great things, and structural blasphemies, and power was given unto it to continue 42 months. The outer court, the 12-month system in its own full measured span, granted its own window to accumulate potential before the threshold. Revelation 13:6-10. It opened its own mouth in structural blasphemy against Source, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell above, and it was given unto it to make war with the awakened, and to overcome them, the heavy toroidal friction forcing carbon to yield to time. Though this is the crucible, the very shedding that releases the light body, and power was given it over all kindreds and tongues and nations, the universal chronological law binding every vessel on the plane equally until the threshold is reached, and all that dwell upon the earth, calibrated wholly to the closed loop to worship it, whose names are not written in the crystallized standing wave of the 13th frequency, the seed, the spark, the waters, the breath of the Lamb Aries, the original sacrifice slain from the foundation of the beginning of the age. If any man have an ear, let him achieve acoustic phase lock, turning inward away from the noise of the closed loop. He that leadeth into captivity, the black hole inhalation, shall go into captivity, be phase cancelled by the white hole exhalation. He that killeth with the sword, the anode's descent, must be killed with the sword, the light body of man rising up to meet the beast. The absolute mechanical law of phase conjugation, the returning wave meeting the boundary it once imposed. Here is the endurance, the charge held steady across the full span of days required to reach total phase cancellation, and the faith of the awakened vessels. Revelation 13:11. I beheld another position rising up out of the earth, the biological cathode rising from the ground, the terrestrial activation completing what the first strike began. Having 2 horns like a lamb, the dual witness geometry itself, the pure Aries spark of the new cycle, expressed now through a biological vessel rising, and it spake as the whole cosmos rising up to reconnect the fallen state and restore the circuit, the breath moving now through the newly restored connection, carrying the resonance of the entire field. Revelation 13:12 through 15. It exerciseth all the power of the first position before it, the biological vessel charging inside the very structure it must ultimately cancel, the toroidal physics requiring the centripetal momentum itself to build the charge, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the 12-month loop, whose deadly wound was healed. And it doeth great wonders, so that it maketh fire come down from above onto the earth in the sight of man, the descent of the spark into the sacrum through the vertebrae, a thermodynamic event visible and measurable in the physical plane, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those wonders it had power to do, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the loop, which had the wound by a sword and did live. The mechanical construction of a perfect internal mirror of the 12-month system, the light body required to precisely mirror the wounded loop before it can cancel it, building the charge and growing within the system it will overcome. And it had power to give breath unto that image, the charge accumulating as the lambda decay is captured and built within the closed loop, the activation of the toroidal pump breathing the current through that completed mirror, that the image should both speak, express the 13th frequency within the field, and cause that as many as would not worship it should be dissolved, the ego death, the necessary shedding of any biological identity that refuses the internal phase conjugation the transformation requires. Revelation 13:16 through 17. It causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the frequency signature of the closed loop stamped in their right hand, the doing, or in their foreheads, the seeing, every possible amplitude within the closed system bound equally across every state the field can hold, and that no man might participate in thermodynamic exchange save that he carried the natural frequency of any vessel calibrated wholly to the closed loop. Revelation 13:18. The breath exhaling and the breath inhaling in one unbroken cycle, the source revealing the source inside the vessel's own breathing, the spark descending, the fire consuming, the double hook itself carrying the dual witness, the spark and the fire passing through the door, the vortex, and the waters. The staff of the absolute authority carrying the breath, commanding it to master the physical boundary, the breath carrying the spark down into the dense magnetic waters, the channel carrying the seed through the door by the breath of source, igniting the fire across the boundary, anchoring the spark in the physical door, dropping the light into the final seed at rest in the carrier. The open receptacle at the vortex, channeling the seed into the physical boundary to mathematically measure the limit of the torus. The seed channeling into the waters of the physical vessel, animated entirely by the breath of source. The physical house using the breath and the spark to generate the kinetic fire heavily stored within the closed boundary. The magnetic waters plus the electric spark plus the seed, 4 plus 2 plus 3, 9 at the surface where the loop and man meet. The fire and the spark striking the spatial crossing, the first terrestrial pin of the macrospatial boundary. The cross-breathing source projecting the thermal fire into the rotating receptacle at the center of the vortex, the temporal wheel. The fire and the spark meeting the final terrestrial anchor, closing the loop. At the root, the seed is one, the singular source point the loop was never capable of moving. 9 plus 1 is 10, and 10 returns to 1, exactly as it began. This is the mechanical reconnection of the circuit back to source.